I bought a house for myself, not for my sis who sided with my cheating ex. Now my parents are furious." Jake's hands trembled as he turned the key in the lock. His heart pounded in his chest, the weight of the small velvet box in his pocket suddenly unbearable. He had spent all day looking forward to this moment, their anniversary. 10 years with Emily. 10 years of love, of shared dreams, of struggles, of whispered promises. He had left work early, picked up her favorite flowers, and stopped by the bakery to get the same cake they had on their wedding day. He even splurged on a reservation at the restaurant where he had proposed. But none of that mattered now, because Emily wasn't alone. The second he stepped into the house, something felt off. The living room lights were dimmed, but not in the cozy way they usually were on special night. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, a mix of cologne that didn't belong to him and the faint trace of something intimate, something unmistakable. His heart slowed, his breath caught in his throat. Then he heard it. A muffled laugh. A rustling of sheets. The sound of movement upstairs. Jake's stomach dropped, nausea curling in his gut like a venomous snake. He moved before he could think, his boots heavy against the wooden stairs. With each step, he begged himself to be wrong, to have misunderstood, to find something, anything, other than what his mind was screaming at him. But the truth was there, waiting. The bedroom door wasn't even locked. Jake pushed it open and the world shattered. Emily was sprawled across their bed, tangled in sheets that were supposed to be theirs alone. Her body was half covered, her hair tousled, her skin flushed. And beside her, just as shocked to see Jake as Jake was to see him, was their neighbor, Derek. The man he had barbecued with, drunk beers with on the porch, helped fix his damn car last winter. Jake's mind went blank, his vision tunneling in on the betrayal laid out before him like some twisted spectacle. Emily's reaction wasn't what he expected. She didn't flinch in guilt. She didn't scramble for an excuse. She didn't even look ashamed. She sighed, annoyed, like he was an inconvenience, like he was ruining her night. Jake felt his fingers twitch at his sides, fists curling, nails digging into his palms. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. Emily sat up, pulling the sheet lazily over herself, rolling her eyes as if he had just interrupted her watching a movie rather than destroying their marriage. "Well," she muttered, voice dripping with irritation, "guess the surprise is ruined." Ruined. Jake let out a choked laugh, but there was no humor in it. His body vibrated with a kind of pain he didn't know was possible. Derek, the coward, had grabbed his clothes, muttering something that might have been an apology, but Jake wasn't listening. His gaze was locked onto Emily, the woman he had promised forever to, the woman who had promised it back. "You," his voice cracked, swallowed by the storm inside him. "You don't even care, do you?" Emily exhaled through her nose, running a hand through her hair like this was nothing more than an inconvenient misunderstanding. "Jake, don't be dramatic." Dramatic. The word rang in his ears, echoing over and over like a cruel joke. He had spent years building a life with her. He had given her everything, his love, his loyalty, his trust. He had thought they were happy, maybe not perfect, but still solid. But here she was, acting like this was nothing. Like he was nothing. "I mean, come on," she continued, her tone light, almost condescending. "Did you really think we were still, like that?" Jake felt something inside him snap. His fingers twitched toward the ring in his pocket, the stupid little anniversary gift he had been so excited to give her. A symbol of their commitment, of their past, of their future. God, he was an idiot. Emily tilted her head, raising a perfectly sculpted brow. "What, Jake? You look like you're gonna cry." He blinked. He hadn't even realized his vision had blurred. Derek, now fully dressed, was making his way toward the door, muttering something about calling later. Jake didn't stop him. What was the point? Emily just sighed again and stretched like a cat, completely unfazed. "You're taking this way too seriously," she murmured. "It's just sex, Jake. It's not like I don't still love you." Love. That word. That lie. He had never felt so small. He swallowed down the bile in his throat, his chest so tight he thought it might cave in. His entire world had collapsed in the span of a single heartbeat, and Emily didn't even have the decency to pretend to be sorry. For the first time in his life, Jake didn't know what to do. He had been betrayed, humiliated, reduced to nothing more than an obstacle in the life of the woman he had worshipped. And she didn't even care. Jake never imagined that the worst betrayal wouldn't come from Emily. It wouldn't come from Derek, the neighbor who had slithered his way into his bed, into his marriage, into the life Jake thought was secure. No, the deepest cut came from someone he had never expected. His own sister, Lisa. She had always been the closest family Jake had. Growing up, they had been inseparable. When their parents fought, when the world felt too heavy, it had always been the two of them against everything. He had spent his life believing that no matter what happened, no matter how bad things got, Lisa would be in his corner. But as the brutal divorce unfolded, the truth emerged. Lisa wasn't on his side. She was on Emily's. Jake found out the hard way. It started with little things. Small, nagging suspicions that he had brushed off at first. The way Lisa would avoid talking about Emily whenever they spoke. The way she seemed strangely neutral about the affair, as if it were some minor disagreement rather than the complete destruction of his marriage. The way she never quite looked him in the eye when he brought up how much he was struggling. Then, he saw them. Lisa and Emily. Together. Laughing over dinner at a restaurant, sipping wine, smiling like two best friends catching up, like nothing had happened. Like Jake was the problem, not the victim. At first, he tried to convince himself there was some kind of explanation. Maybe Lisa was just trying to smooth things over, maybe she felt bad for Emily, maybe she was just being polite. But when he confronted her, he got his answer. Lisa sighed, swirling her wine glass, looking at him like he was being unreasonable. "Jake," she said, exasperated, "you're blowing this way out of proportion." He stared at her, unable to believe what he was hearing. Blowing it out of proportion? Lisa, she cheated on me. On our anniversary. In our house. And you're out having drinks with her like nothing happened. Lisa rolled her eyes, setting down her glass. "Look, I know this sucks for you, but you need to take some responsibility here. You weren't exactly the perfect husband." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt his fingers tighten around the edge of the table. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Lisa gave him a pointed look. "Jake, come on. You work long hours. You're not exactly Mr. Romance. Emily told me how lonely she was, how she felt neglected. And honestly, I kind of get it." Jake felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Are you seriously blaming me for her affair?" Lisa shrugged. "I'm just saying, relationships are complicated. Maybe if you had made her feel more wanted, she wouldn't have had to look somewhere else." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. His own sister, his blood, was defending the woman who had humiliated him. He let out a humorless laugh, his body vibrating with anger. "And what? That justifies it? That makes it okay?" Lisa sighed again, as if she was the one who was tired of this conversation. "No one's saying it was okay. But Emily and I have gotten close over the years. She's been good to me, Jake. She's helped me out when I needed it. She watches my kids, she invites me out, she's been generous." And that's when it hit him. Lisa wasn't just taking Emily's side, she was benefiting from it. Emily had bought her loyalty. Fancy dinners, gift, babysitting favors. All the little things that Lisa had quietly enjoyed while Jake was too busy working to notice. It wasn't just about friendship. It was about what Emily could give her. Jake's stomach twisted in disgust. "So that's what this is about? The free meals? The gifts?" Lisa's expression darkened. "Don't be an ass, Jake. It's not like that." But it was exactly like that. And suddenly, everything made sense. Lisa had never defended him. She had never been there when he needed her. Because siding with Emily was easier. More comfortable. More rewarding. Jake pushed his chair back and stood, shaking his head. "You know what? Do whatever you want. Have dinner with her. Take her side. But don't expect me to pretend like this isn't the biggest betrayal of my life." Lisa crossed her arms. "Oh, stop being so dramatic." Dramatic. Just like Emily. That was the moment Jake realized. He had lost both of them. Not just his wife, but his sister, too. And the worst part? They didn't even care. Jake never thought his life would sink this low. The apartment was barely big enough to fit his regret. A dingy, one-bedroom hole in the wall with peeling wallpaper, flickering lights, and a constant drip from the bathroom sink that no one would fix. The mattress on the floor was lumpy, the second-hand couch smelled like cigarette smoke, and the entire place reeked of failure. But this was all he could afford after the divorce. Emily had gotten the house, of course. She fought for it, claiming she needed stability, and since she had Lisa backing her up, their parents pressuring him to be reasonable, and a lawyer far more expensive than his, Jake had lost. He lost everything. His home. His savings. His dignity. And now, he sat in his miserable little apartment, eating another cup of instant noodles, scrolling through his phone, knowing he shouldn't, knowing it would only make things worse, but doing it anyway. There it was, again. Another post from Emily. Dinner with the bestie. The caption read, accompanied by a photo of Emily and Lisa, all smiles, sipping cocktails at a fancy restaurant, the same restaurant Jake had taken Emily to on their anniversary a year before. The same anniversary she had spent in bed with Derek. Jake clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around his phone. Lisa had her arm draped over Emily's shoulder, her smile just as smug. And just below the post, the comments were rolling in. "You two are gorgeous. Sparkling heart. OMG, love this friendship. Some men don't deserve queens like you." Jake's stomach twisted. Then he saw Lisa's comment under the post, and that was the final blow. "Guess someone should have treated you better." Jake slammed his phone onto the counter, his appetite vanishing. The humiliation never stopped. Every week, Emily posted pictures of her amazing new life. Fancy dinners, vacations, spa days, all the things she used to complain they couldn't afford when they were together. Lisa was always in the background, laughing, drinking, living off Emily's generosity, while her own brother rotted in a place barely fit to be called a home. Jake had never felt so small. He tried reaching out to his parents, hoping for some kind of support, some acknowledgement that what was happening to him wasn't fair. Instead, he got disappointment. "You need to stop being so bitter, Jake," his mother sighed over the phone. "Divorces are messy, but that doesn't mean you should hold a grudge." "A grudge?" Jake repeated, his voice hollow. "Mom, she cheated on me. She humiliated me. Lisa's laughing about it online." His father scoffed. "Maybe you should have worked a little harder to keep your wife happy." Jake felt something inside him snap. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice rising. "So this is my fault now?" "We're just saying," his mother replied, her voice sharp. "You and Emily were together for a long time. You should try to work things out, not tear each other down." Jake let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face. "She's not trying to work things out. She's flaunting her new life in my face. Lisa is helping her do it. And you too," he exhaled sharply. "You don't even care." There was silence on the other end. Then his father spoke, his tone final. "Jake, stop playing the victim. Move on. Move on." Like it was that easy. Like losing everything, watching his ex-wife and sister mock him from a distance, struggling to pay rent in a filthy apartment, living off cheap food, working extra shifts just to stay afloat, like that was something he could just get over. But if there was one thing Jake knew, it was this. No one was coming to save him. Not his family. Not his friends. Not anyone. So he had two choices. Stay bitter. Stay angry. Stay broken. Or prove them all wrong. Jake set his jaw, the fire in his gut replacing the despair that had been sitting there for months. Fine. If they wanted to see him as a failure, let them. He'd show them exactly what he could do. He'd rebuild his life from scratch. And when he did, when he climbed out of the hole they left him in, when he stood on solid ground again, he would make damn sure they regretted every second they spent laughing at him. Jake barely slept. He worked at the garage from sunrise to sunset, hands covered in grease, body aching from hours of lifting, welding, and repairing. When his shift ended, he didn't go home. He went straight to side gigs, fixing cars in dark, cluttered driveways for cash. And when the night finally settled, when most people were unwinding with a beer or watching TV, Jake sat hunched over a second-hand laptop, poring over business textbooks, forcing himself to learn. Failure wasn't an option. He refused to be the man they mocked online. He refused to be the punchline of Emily and Lisa's joke. He refused to let his parents' words, "Move on, stop playing the victim," define him. Every dollar he earned was another step away from the humiliation, another brick in the foundation of the future he was clawing toward. At first, it was hell. Jake barely had time to eat, and when he did, it was usually some gas station sandwich or a protein bar. His body ached constantly, and exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Rick, the owner of the garage, noticed. At first, it was just small things. Rick nodding in approval when Jake took on extra shifts, letting him handle tougher jobs, trusting him with high-end clients. Then, gradually, Rick started handing him responsibilities that went beyond fixing cars. Jake, handle the inventory. Jake, check the finances for this week. Jake, deal with that supplier, he's trying to overcharge us. Jake took it all without hesitation. The more he learned, the more Rick relied on him. And then, one day everything changed. It was just another grueling Friday. The garage was packed, the air thick with the scent of motor oil and sweat. Jake was under a truck, wrench in hand, when he heard Rick calling for him. When he stood up, wiping his hands on his already filthy jeans, he saw Rick watching him carefully. "We need to talk," Rick said, motioning him toward the small, cluttered office at the back of the shop. Jake followed, his stomach tightening. Rick shut the door behind them, leaning against the desk. He was a tough old guy, built like a brick wall, his face weathered from years of hard work. But right now there was something different in his eyes. "I've been watching you," Rick said, arms crossed. "You don't stop. You take on more than anyone else here. You've got a head for this business, more than just fixing cars." Jake didn't say anything, just nodded, waiting. Rick exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm getting old, kid. I've been thinking about retirement. But I don't want to sell this place to some corporate suit who's just gonna run it into the ground. I need someone who gives a damn. Someone who knows what they're doing." Jake's heart started pounding. Rick met his gaze. "I'm offering you first dibs. You interested in buying this place?" Jake felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. Owning the garage? His own business? A year ago, he had been sitting in a filthy apartment, eating instant noodles while his ex-wife and sister mocked him online. And now, he was being handed the chance to own something real. But reality hit fast. Jake swallowed, his throat dry. "I don't have that kind of money, Rick." Rick smirked. "I figured. Which is why I'm giving you a shot. I'll work out a deal, low down payment, long-term financing. But only if you're serious." Serious? Jake had never been more serious about anything in his life. He straightened, nodding firmly. "I want this." Rick clapped him on the shoulder. "Then let's make it happen." For the first time in a long time, Jake felt something he hadn't felt since his world collapsed. Hope. Jake never imagined the day would come when he would feel nothing but indifference toward Emily and Lisa. For years, their laughter had haunted him. Their social media posts, their smugness, their constant mockery had fueled his rage, pushing him to work harder, to claw his way out of the hole they buried him in. Every insult, every comment about how he was a failure, how he would never move on, it had all been gasoline on the fire that kept him going. And now, standing in the doorway of his own house, a place he had paid for with his own money, he realized something. He didn't care about them anymore. Not really. They had destroyed him once, but that was a long time ago. He had rebuilt himself, but they had crumbled. Emily was the first to fall. Her perfect, new life hadn't lasted long. Derek, the man she had thrown everything away for, had left her. Jake had heard about it from a mutual acquaintance, one of the few people who had actually stayed neutral during the divorce. Apparently, Derek had moved on to someone younger, someone new. The same way Emily had once moved on from Jake without hesitation. Karma. Jake didn't even feel satisfaction when he heard it. Just a dull, distant sense of inevitability. Emily had spent the divorce settlement like it would never run out, lavish trips, expensive clothes, fancy dinners. She had lived like she was still the trophy wife of a man with a stable income, forgetting that the money was finite and she no longer had someone else's paycheck to rely on. By the time Derek left, she was nearly broke. She had no job, no real career. The woman who had once laughed at Jake for struggling to pay rent now found herself desperate. She tried dating rich men, but they never stuck around long enough to take care of her. The world didn't reward people like Emily in the long run. Once the shine wore off, once she wasn't the exciting new thing, she was discarded just as easily as she had discarded Jake. Jake didn't reach out to her. She had made her choices. She could live with them. Lisa's downfall was just as pathetic. She had quit her job months ago, convinced she was on the verge of marrying Rich. She had met some guy, Jake never bothered to learn his name, who had talked like he had money, acted like he had connections. Lisa had been so sure she was about to level up her life, to finally escape the mundane world of actual work and responsibility. She had gloated about it online, about how she was living her best life. Then, reality hit. The guy was broke. Not just broke, in debt. By the time Lisa figured it out, it was too late. She had burned bridges at her old job, boasting about how she was moving on to better things. Now she had nothing. No savings, no backup plan. And suddenly, she wasn't laughing at Jake anymore. The last he had heard, she was scrambling to find work, begging for opportunities, while Emily was considering moving back in with their parents. Jake wondered if his mother and father would still tell him to work things out with Emily now. Not that it mattered. Jake had moved on. Not just financially, not just in terms of success, but in every way that mattered. He had his own business now. His own house. A future that was his. And for the first time in years, when he thought about Emily and Lisa, he felt nothing at all. Jake never imagined the day would come when he would feel nothing but indifference toward Emily and Lisa. For years, their laughter had haunted him. Their social media posts, their smugness, their constant mockery had fueled his rage, pushing him to work harder, to claw his way out of the hole they buried him in. Every insult, every comment about how he was a failure, how he would never move on, it had all been gasoline on the fire that kept him going. And now, standing in the doorway of his own house, a place he had paid for with his own money, he realized something. He didn't care about them anymore. Not really. They had destroyed him once. But that was a long time ago. He had rebuilt himself. But they had crumbled. Emily was the first to fall. Her perfect, new life hadn't lasted long. Derek, the man she had thrown everything away for, had left her. Jake had heard about it from a mutual acquaintance, one of the few people who had actually stayed neutral during the divorce. Apparently, Derek had moved on to someone younger, someone new. The same way Emily had once moved on from Jake without hesitation. Karma. Jake didn't even feel satisfaction when he heard it. Just a dull, distant sense of inevitability. Emily had spent the divorce settlement like it would never run out, lavish trips, expensive clothes, fancy dinners. She had lived like she was still the trophy wife of a man with a stable income, forgetting that the money was finite and she no longer had someone else's paycheck to rely on. By the time Derek left, she was nearly broke. She had no job, no real career. The woman who had once laughed at Jake for struggling to pay rent now found herself desperate. She tried dating rich men, but they never stuck around long enough to take care of her. The world didn't reward people like Emily in the long run. Once the shine wore off, once she wasn't the exciting new thing, she was discarded just as easily as she had discarded Jake. Jake didn't reach out to her. She had made her choices. She could live with them. Lisa's downfall was just as pathetic. She had quit her job months ago, convinced she was on the verge of marrying Rich. She had met some guy, Jake never bothered to learn his name, who had talked like he had money, acted like he had connections. Lisa had been so sure she was about to level up her life, to finally escape the mundane world of actual work and responsibility. She had gloated about it online, about how she was living her best life. Then, reality hit. The guy was broke. Not just broke, in debt. By the time Lisa figured it out, it was too late. She had burned bridges at her old job, boasting about how she was moving on to better things. Now she had nothing. No savings, no backup plan. And suddenly, she wasn't laughing at Jake anymore. The last he had heard, she was scrambling to find work, begging for opportunities, while Emily was considering moving back in with their parents. Jake wondered if his mother and father would still tell him to work things out with Emily now. Not that it mattered. Jake had moved on. Not just financially, not just in terms of success, but in every way that mattered. He had his own business now, his own house, a future that was his, and for the first time in years, when he thought about Emily and Lisa, he felt nothing at all.